weekend. Hope you all had a good one. This week we are diving into Olsen, talking about planning for student engagement and how she plans out. I'm going to link here our PD and link for peer observations as we go on. So then you'll have that as a resource as well. And that's for the PD choices for February and March.
So here we have this big picture. Now we have this vision of where we're going. Talk us through your lesson planning skeleton, just kind of where you start and then how you go forward.
The skill, maybe they'll take some notes on it just as a quick reminder. We don't spend a ton of time on notes, but every day, we get a little bit more we add. And now I want you to practice it. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to bring you back and we're going to see what you had. And then I'm going to release you back maybe into groups. So it's always, what's the big picture? How are we going to practice that? Mm-hmm. So many times it's, together as a class or your group of 4 or partner up. It could be walk around the room. There things might be posted around the room. But it's always, everything is directly related to that skill. Mm-hmm. Devs. At the beginning of the year, I taught all the basic skills just as a review for the students. So like exposition, setting, conflict, climax. And then what I did at that point is we added more detail to it. So details that they wouldn't know, like what are the 4 types of exposition? I had them look at prologue, flashback, inner monologue, dialogue, and then what's the purpose? So we would always take a basic skill that they would have gotten in 7th grade, and then I give them something new so that they don't feel like, oh, this is just review, I'm wasting my time. So we're always adding a new detail in.
And you're breaking down, so exposition,
yes.
This is what I'm expecting to be like this, to meet the standard of mastery of this concept, this is what you need to know.
Yeah, and at the beginning of the year, I would teach it and we would look at it in texts. There's a document that I have where students would actually write what's the background information that's revealed. And then when we got to the narrative point, they actually told me, this is the type of exposition I'm going to be using in my narrative, mm-hmm. and this is what I'm going to be revealing. Mm-hmm. So it was very helpful at the beginning of the year to talk about the basic skill, and then as we've progressed, they're now applying it. Mm-hmm. One activity we did as we walked around the room, I had a story that was broken into 10 pages, and they're quite large pages, and students would have a very specific thing that they were looking for. So if they were looking for setting, every page that they went to, they would identify, underline, highlight, however they wanted to mark the text. If they saw a detail that was related to setting, they would use their color, and then they would tell me, this is a temporal setting, this is an environmental mm-hmm. setting, this is an individual setting. Mm-hmm. And they would go to every single page, mm-hmm. and they came, more in line with, I can identify mm-hmm. these examples now. Mm-hmm. And then they would hit all 10 stations. Mm-hmm. And then the week after that, I broke them, instead of 10 stations, I broke a story into 5 parts. And they had 3 other partners. And then we became more narrow in our plot chart of the things mm-hmm. that we were specifically looking for. And again, they're still underlining, they're still highlighting, writing notes on the text. So mm-hmm. they're, the story's printed out for them so that they could mark it up. And by the time they're done, they could see that the page is totally marked up with all different colors using, protagonists and antagonists and setting and all of these details, figurative language, mm-hmm. everything that is included in a story they can see is just embedded throughout. Mm-hmm. So it's not just like, I got to throw out one example of figurative language. I could see that it's used multiple spots, and then how is it being used?
Cool. And then it sounded like you had resources for your students to keep them on track on what was a setting.
Yes. So I created, at the beginning of the year, we took notes. So they had access to their notebooks. Mm-hmm. And then what I did is I created note cards and then I laminated them. And they could take the note card. So for example, they had climax. They have a note card with them. It tells them what the climax is. And then it tells them the 3 types of climax that they could look for. Mm. So if they got to that point, they could use the note card that was with them. They could go to their sheet and say, circle this part, this mm-hmm. is the climax. And then they could quickly reference, this is showing character growth. Mm-hmm. Or this is a transition from the conflict, so mm-hmm. they could specifically tell me what was happening.
Cool. And then also had partners to be able to bounce ideas off of too,
Yes.
as they went through that.
Yeah.
It sounds like this probably was very impactful, obviously for writing, but have you seen their growth in their reading to be able to identify this, like reading comprehension wise?
Yeah, we get into a lot more detail with our texts, especially when we're looking at some of the extra skills that we have. Like if we're talking exposition and, what background information was revealed, most of the time we don't think about that. Kids just start a story. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, why is the author doing this? Why is the author revealing this at this moment? And it just allows you to get into a little bit more deeper detail as to what's happening in a story. And you could have, more deeper conversations with that. Especially if we're talking about like characters and we want to, get into talking a little bit about culture and, courageous conversations. But by looking at the specifics of the characters, we could, see what is the character thinking, what is the moral aspect of the character, and be able to get into it that way.
Cool. Very cool. So thank you so much for letting us have some time of yours and sharing some wisdom and some ideas on how to break down our lessons to be more engaging. So thank you very much.
Thank you.